Ifiok, a beautiful and wise woman, resided in Burkina Faso, a realm of breathtaking natural beauty where the lush greenery and majestic trees seemed to stretch up to the heavens. The Ifiok people, her ancestors in Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria, had named her Ifiok, meaning wisdom, and she lived up to her name through her thoughtful and discerning ways. With a deep understanding of the world around her, Ifiok navigated life's challenges with grace and poise, her actions guided by a profound sense of wisdom. Ifiok possessed a remarkable gift, the power to heal. Her hands, hard like ancient tree roots, held a deep wisdom that allowed her to soothe the most grievous wounds, mend broken bones, and coax even the most stubborn illnesses back to health. People from far-flung villages and distant lands traveled treacherous paths, braved raging rivers, and endured countless hardships just to reach her doorstep and benefit from her extraordinary touch. Ifiok's hut, nestled beside a whispering waterfall, was a testament to her skill. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, their potent aromas mingling in the humid air. Clay pots overflowed with healing balms, and shelves were lined with curious ingredients gathered from the forest's bounty. When Ifiok healed, it was as if the very spirit of the earth worked through her. Yet, despite her extraordinary gift, Ifiok harbored a spirit as thorny as the acacia bush. She was impatient, quick to anger, and possessed a sharp tongue that could wound deeper than any illness. She would often berate her patients for their ailments, scolding them for their carelessness or perceived ignorance. "Foolishness led you to this." She'd snap, even as her hands worked miracles on their afflicted bodies. Her fame as a healer was undeniable, but her reputation as a cantankerous woman preceded her. People would arrive with hope in their eyes, only to be met with Ifiok's stinging remarks. They would leave healed, yes, but often with a bitter taste in their mouths, wondering why such a gifted soul could be so unkind. The villagers of her own community, while acknowledging her invaluable skills, kept a respectful distance. They knew her moods were unpredictable, and her temper flared like a dry bush in the Harmattan winds. Children were warned to avoid her hut unless accompanied by a desperate parent. One day, a terrible sickness swept through the land, unlike anything Ifiok had ever encountered. It caused a searing fever, racking coughs, and a debilitating weakness. Even her most potent remedies seemed to falter against its relentless advance. Fear, a chilling newcomer, gripped Ifiok's heart as she watched her own people succumb. Desperation gnawed at her. She worked tirelessly, day and night, but the sickness continued its cruel march. Her usual impatience grew into frustrated fury, and her sharp tongue lashed out at everyone around her, even the sick themselves. "Why are you so weak?" She'd fume, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and fear. Seeing Ifiok struggle and the villagers' mounting despair, the village elder, a wise man named Baba Mosi, decided it was time for a difficult conversation. He approached Ifiok's hut one evening, his face etched with concern. "Ifiok," he began, his voice gentle but firm, "your healing hands are a blessing, but your spirit is casting a long shadow over your gift." Ifiok bristled. "I am doing everything I can. This sickness is strong, stronger than anything I have faced." "That may be true," Baba Mosi replied calmly, "but your anger and impatience are not helping. They create a disharmony, a resistance to the very healing you seek to bring." Ifiok scoffed. "What nonsense is this? Sickness cares nothing for my mood." "Perhaps not directly," Baba Mosi conceded, "but it affects those you try to heal. Fear and resentment can hinder the body's ability to mend. And your own inner turmoil, Ifiok, it clouds your wisdom, the very Ifiok you are named for." His words struck a chord, a tiny flicker of unease in Ifiok's hardened heart. She looked at her trembling hands, hands that had always been a source of power, now feeling strangely heavy and ineffective. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, the usual sharpness gone. "Then listen," Baba Mosi said, his eyes filled with compassion. "The great baobab tree in the center of the ancestral grove, it has stood for centuries, weathering every storm with strength and resilience. It is said to hold the wisdom of ages within its bark. Go there, Ifiok, sit at its roots, listen to the wind in its branches. Perhaps it holds the medicine your spirit needs." Humbled and desperate, Ifiok followed Baba Mosi's advice. She walked to the ancestral grove, the ancient baobab towering before her like a silent giant. Its massive trunk, scarred by time, seemed to pulse with a quiet energy. She sat at its base, the cool earth grounding her. At first, she felt only her usual frustration. The wind seemed to mock her with its rustling whispers, but as she stayed there, hour after hour, something began to shift within her. She started to notice the intricate patterns in the bark, the tenacity of the small plants growing in its shade, the unwavering presence of the tree despite the harshness of the elements. She listened to the sounds of the forest, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, the distant murmur of the river. She realized that everything was connected, a delicate balance of life and energy. Her own anger, her own harshness, felt like a jarring discord in this natural harmony. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Ifiok closed her eyes. She focused on her breath, trying to quiet the storm within her. And then she heard it, not with her ears, but with her heart. A gentle whisper, like the rustling of the baobab's leaves, seemed to say, "Healing flows from compassion, not from judgment. Strength lies in patience, not in anger." The words resonated deep within her. She saw, with a clarity she had never possessed before, how her own inner turmoil was hindering her ability to truly heal. Her anger was a barrier, separating her from her patience, from her community, and even from the full potential of her own gift. Ifiok returned to her heart a changed woman. The sharpness in her eyes had softened, replaced by a quiet understanding. When patients came, she greeted them with gentle concern, listening patiently to their stories before tending to their wounds. If they spoke of their mistakes, she offered words of encouragement rather than scorn. The change in Ifiok was palpable. Her touch seemed to carry a new warmth, a deeper empathy, and as her inner spirit began to heal, so too did her ability to combat the terrible sickness that plagued her village. She experimented with new combinations of herbs, her mind now clear and focused, guided by compassion rather than frustration. Slowly, painstakingly, the tide began to turn. The fever began to break, the cough subsided, and the strength returned to weakened bodies. The villagers, witnessing Ifiok's transformation and the waning of the illness, were filled with a renewed sense of hope and gratitude. Ifiok, the once feared and sharp-tongued healer, became a beacon of hope and kindness. People still sought her healing touch, but now they also sought her gentle words and her understanding heart. She learned that true healing was not just about mending the body, but about nurturing the spirit. And Ifiok, blessed with wisdom both in her hands and in her heart, finally lived up to the meaning of her name, becoming a true source of Ifiok for her community. The great baobab in the ancestral grove stood as a silent testament to the day the strong healer finally sought healing for her own character, unlocking the full power of her extraordinary gift. Months after the village had recovered, and Ifiok's hut once again became a place of peace and restoration, a stranger appeared at dawn. Clad in a cloak of bark and vines, his eyes shimmered like the forest floor after rain. He carried no wound, no illness, only an old wooden staff carved with symbols that seemed to shift like leaves in the wind. He waited silently at the edge of Ifiok's compound until she noticed him. "Do you seek healing?" she asked, approaching with calm courtesy. The man shook his head slowly. "No, wise one, I am only here to return what you left behind." Before Ifiok could speak, he reached into a leather pouch and pulled out something small, dark, and pulsing faintly with light. It was a seed, but not an ordinary one. It radiated a warmth that stirred something deep in her chest. "This," he said, placing it in her hands, "is the anger you buried beneath the baobab. Every healer leaves behind a piece of themselves when they learn the balance between power and peace. But not all dare to look at what they've surrendered." Ifiok stared at the seed. It throbbed in her palm like a forgotten heartbeat. "Why return it?" she asked cautiously. "Because you may one day need it," he answered. "Wisdom does not mean losing fire, it means knowing when to wield it. Even patience must remember its shadow." Before she could ask his name, he vanished, melting into the morning mist, as if he had never been there. That night, Ifiok buried the seed beneath her hut, where the roots of her healing herbs grew, not to hide it in fear, but to let it grow again, this time with purpose. And from that place, A new plant sprouted weeks later, one no one in the village had ever seen. It bore leaves shaped like eyes, and its scent shifted with the mood of the healer tending it. Some days, it smelled of mint and honey, on others, of smoke. Ifiok never told anyone what it truly was. But from then on, her healing was more than a gift. It was a choice fueled not just by compassion, but by the memory of her shadow. And those who visited her swore that in her gaze, they saw not just comfort, but something else too. A flame that could burn if ever needed again. She became a mentor to many young healers, teaching them that knowledge alone was not enough. She emphasized character, the harmony between mind, spirit, and the world around them. She taught that patience was medicine, that a kind word could be as healing as any tincture, and that the healer must always tend to their own soul as carefully as they tend to others. Ifiok's hut remained beside the waterfall, but it was no longer feared. It became a sanctuary. Children no longer needed to be dragged there. They came freely, drawn by her laughter, her stories, her listening ear. Her sharp tongue, once a blade, had become a plow, turning the hard soil of pain into the fertile ground for growth and hope. And every season, without fail, she made the quiet journey back to the great baobab tree. She would sit beneath it in silence, remembering the lesson it had taught her, giving thanks, and emptying herself of the year's burdens. The villagers often saw her walking there at dawn, her silhouette calm, her spirit still in conversation with the earth. Before her time came to an end, Ifiok left behind a scroll, a letter to the next generation of healers. In it, she wrote, "To heal the flesh, you must touch the body. But to heal a life, you must touch the heart. The forest hides its secrets not from the foolish, but from the unkind. Let your hands be steady, but let your spirit be soft. For the greatest medicine of all is love. A gift without grace becomes a burden." Ifiok was blessed with a rare and powerful gift, but it was her character that determined the impact. Her story teaches that true power lies not in what we can do, but in how we do it, with empathy and a listening heart.